All right, so when you're done working, it's super critical that you clean up. This is always important, but it's especially important when you're working from home and it's a shared space that isn't dedicated for studio use. Clay is rather benign. It's not a really major health issue until it's dry. And then when it becomes this dry powder, it's really bad for your lungs. And of course, it's not bad if you accidentally breathe in a little bit of clay in a moment, but over time it does add up and can be a really big health concern. So it's important that for your own health and safety, but also for your family and whoever is living with you, that you're practicing good studio habits. And of course, when we get back on campus, that you're continuing to do so and already have those habits in place, because quite honestly, it's also for my sake, because I'm around it the most, right? So here's what we need to do. Any extra clay, if it is still really nice and wet and malleable, just put it right back in the bag. If it's kind of like dry, I just give it a quick dunk in water, and then I'm just going to put it back in the bag. If I have any clay on my tools, if it's wet, I might grab something and scrape it off. And ideally, I can just scrape it off and put it in the bag as well. Or if it's dry or starting to dry, I'm going to get my little sponge and wipe it down. So really, you should be wiping down all your tools at the end of each work session. If that doesn't happen, and to be honest, I'm not doing that every single time, if I end up getting some clay dust in my box here because I've dumped my tools in when they had, clay on them, the clay dried, and then it crumbled in here, I'm going to take everything out and I'm going to carefully dump this away in the trash, making sure that I'm not like blowing it and creating this big dust cloud, and then I'm going to rinse the whole thing out. So you kind of want to think about, like, are there some daily practices of cleanup that you need to do, and then are there maybe like once a month things that you should probably check on, right? So a quick wipe down for all of my tools, and even things like this, if I have little clay bits inside the crevices, again, that's going to eventually dry and come off. If I have a bunch of clay on my hands, I'm not going to do myself any favors cleaning with dirty hands. So I might just quickly wipe my hands off. They don't have to be perfectly clean, but just chunks of clay aren't going to be very helpful. Rinsing my sponge as I need. So you can see why it's really important to have a bucket of water with you. And then last thing is your actual work surface. Don't just pick it up and fling it, because then all of a sudden all these clay chunks that have fallen off your piece onto your mat are just going to get everywhere, right? So the benefit of having this work surface is that you can carefully clean up. So you could kind of fold towards the middle to get all your clay in the center. And you could either just kind of scrape it up, you could dump it into a trash can. If it's just little crumbs, I might just dump it back in the bag. And then you really ought to wipe this thing down as well. And again, if this is something you're not going to get to for a day, maybe on Friday or every Saturday or whatever you're cleaning, if you don't get to wiping it down, then you should carefully fold it up so that, again, you're not flinging crumbs everywhere. And then when you open it, you have to remember to also carefully open it so that you're not creating this pile of clay dust, right? But otherwise, it should be wiped down periodically at the end of each class. And you can see, even when I'm wiping it down, it is going to get stained, right? And about once a month or so, I probably will give this a good wipe down where I might take it outside and hose it down. The only thing to keep in mind is, now that I've wiped all my tools down, even though there are some holes in here to vent it, I would probably leave this open to let everything fully dry, because over time that will start to potentially mold in here. And so we don't really want moldy tools, right? So if you have the possibility of leaving this open for an hour or so, that would be great. Just don't forget to close up your clay bag. If you happen to lose your twist tie, that's not a big deal. Just make sure all the air is out. If you need to add water, I would just grab, and you would need to add water if it's kind of dry and crumbly, just like add a squeeze of water from your sponge, twist it, and then again, the weight of my bag can keep it held down. The last thing is my water, right? So if you're in a situation where you are able to just kind of have a dedicated workspace and you can even leave a bucket of water, great. If it's outside, put a towel over it so you're not getting mosquitoes or other creatures living in there. And then maybe at the end of each week, after it's had time to settle, then you would drain off all of the water. And then at the bottom, there will be some sludge. Let's see if I have any. So I don't have too much because this is fairly clean or fresh water. Here we go. So you can see like just little chunks of clay. This shouldn't go right down your drain. So when I'm done, I let it settle and then I drain it off, and I usually hold my hand over it so I catch any chunks of clay, and then I'll wipe the rest of this out into the trash can. If you need to do this right after class, same thing, right? Just strain it so you're not getting chunks of clay down the sink. And you can strain it outside over plants if you need to. Maybe just move it around so the same plant isn't getting the same water, and then you can let this dry.